The October rain didn't just fall. It battered the corrugated metal roof of our 1K apartment like a relentless creditor demanding payment. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp tatami and the lingering scent of instant ramen, the salty perfume of poverty. I sat at the low scratch table, the cold seeping through the floorboards and into my bones. My hands, calloused and cracked from 12-hour shifts at the docks, were clenched around a lukewarm cup of tea. It was 2:17 a.m. The silence of the room was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic dripping of a leak into a plastic bucket near the kitchenette. I stared at the eviction notice lying on the table. It was a polite piece of paper, standard phrasing, threatening to dismantle our entire existence in 48 hours. Beside it lay my wallet, open and gutted, 3 crumpled bills and a handful of silver coins. Calculated specifically, I had exactly enough for 2 more meals and 1 subway fare. After that, we were ghosts. The exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing behind my eyes, blurring the edges of the room. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the panic of a father who knows he has failed. I looked at the sliding door where my son slept. I should have worked the double shift. I should have sold the watch my father gave me, even though it was the last tether to a dignity I no longer possessed. A soft rustle from the bedroom froze me. The door slid open just an inch. Leo stood there in the shadows. At 5 years old, he was too small for the heavy burdens of our life, yet he carried them in the dark circles under his eyes. He dragged his feet across the mats, clutching his blue plastic piggy bank, the one shaped like a rocket ship. He didn't say a word at first. He just walked to the table and climbed onto the cushion beside me. "You're awake," I whispered, forcing a tone of normalcy that cracked midway. "The rain is loud," Leo said. He placed the rocket ship on the table between us. It made a hollow clatter. "And you were sighing, like the heater when it breaks." "I'm sorry, buddy. Go back to sleep." "No." He shook his head, his hair messy and sticking up in tufts. "I heard you talking to the landlord yesterday. I heard him say, 'Get out.'" My stomach turned over. I reached out to touch his shoulder, but he pulled away, focused on his task. He wrestled with the rubber stopper at the bottom of the bank. With a pop, his fortune spilled out. It wasn't much. A pile of 10-yen coins, a few 50s, maybe 200 yen in total. It was roughly $3. "This is for you," he said, pushing the pile toward the eviction notice. "Leo, keep that. That's for your robot." "I don't want a robot," he said, his voice trembling with a terrifying maturity. "I want you to stop looking like that. I want to buy a smile, a real one, like in the pictures with Mommy." I couldn't breathe. The shame was hotter than anger. My son was trying to buy my happiness with pocket change because I couldn't provide safety. "It's not enough," I choked out, the truth spilling before I could stop it. "Leo, I'm sorry, but it's not enough." He stared at the coins, then at me. A determination hardened his soft features. "Then we need to find someone who has enough. We need to go to the Golden Street." He meant the Ginza district, the place we sometimes walked through just to look at the lights. I started to argue, but looking at his face, I realized I had nothing left to lose. If we were going down, we wouldn't do it sitting in the dark, waiting for the bailiffs. "Okay," I said, standing up. "Get your coat." The streets of Ginza were a different world, slick with rain that reflected neon purple and gold. We walked for an hour, Leo clutching his bag of coins like a talisman. The sheer wealth of the district was suffocating. Even the air smelled expensive, leather, ozone, and high-end perfume. We stopped near a Michelin-starred restaurant where limousines idled like sleeping beasts. That was when the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a noise, but a sudden, terrified silence that swept down the block. 3 black sedans turned the corner, moving in a predatory formation. They pulled up to the curb with synchronized precision. The doors opened, and 4 men stepped out. They were giants, wearing suits that cost more than my life's earnings, earpieces coiled like translucent worms against their necks. They scanned the street with eyes dead to empathy. Then, from the center car, she emerged. The woman was a striking anomaly in the neon chaos. She looked to be in her early 50s, but timeless like a statue carved from ice. She wore a suit of immaculate white silk, tailored to a sharpness that could cut glass. Her hair was a severe bob of iron grey, and her posture was so regal it made the surrounding luxury look cheap. She didn't just exit a car, she arrived. Her eyes were dark, scanning the street with a boredom that was more terrifying than anger. She radiated a power that made the air feel thin. This was the Yakuza queen. The rumor, the ghost story whispered in the back alleys. I grabbed Leo's hand to pull him back, fear spiking my adrenaline. "Leo, stay back." But I was too slow. Leo saw something I didn't. He saw a solution. He broke my grip and ran forward, splashing through a puddle right into her path. "Stop!" a bodyguard barked, stepping forward, his hand reaching inside his jacket. "Wait!" The woman's voice sliced through the rain. It was calm, low, and commanded absolute obedience. The bodyguard froze. The woman looked down at my son, who stood barely reaching her waist. Leo didn't flinch. He opened his plastic bag and held up his $3 in copper coins. "Are you the boss?" Leo asked. The woman tilted her head. "I am." "My daddy lost his smile," Leo said, pointing back at me. I stood paralyzed under the gaze of her security detail. "He needs help. I have this. It's all my money. Will you help him?" The silence stretched, agonizing and long. The woman looked at the dirty coins in the small wet hand. Then she looked at her own white suit. Slowly, defying every instinct of self-preservation I had for her, she knelt. Her knee pressed into the wet pavement, ruining the silk. She brought herself eye level with Leo. "You offer me your entire fortune?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. "Yes," Leo whispered. "Please make Daddy smile again." She stared at him for a long moment, and I saw a flicker of something in her dark eyes, a memory perhaps, or a recognition of a desperation she understood. She reached out with a gloved hand and took a single coin. "Deal," she said. She stood up, towering once more, and looked directly at me. The intensity of her gaze hit me like a physical blow. "You, father." I'm sorry, we'll go," I stammered. "You're not going anywhere," she said. "Your son has employed me, and I take my contract seriously." She gestured to the open door of the limousine. "Get in." I looked at the dark interior of the car, then at the eviction notice in my mind, then at Leo's hopeful face. I realized then that the rain had stopped feeling cold. It just felt like fate. "I don't know who you are," I said, my voice shaking. "Exactly," she replied, her lips curving into a smile that was both a promise and a threat. "That is your greatest asset. Now get in, before I change my mind." I stepped toward the car, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't know then that I was walking away from the only life I knew. I didn't know that by morning I would owe this woman more than money. I took Leo's hand, and together we stepped into the dark. The silence inside the Mercedes Maybach was absolute, a pressurized vacuum that severed us from the world I knew. The rain, which moments ago had been a freezing torrent, soaking through my thin jacket, was now just a cinematic blur against the triple-paned tinted glass. The interior smelled of aged mahogany, sandalwood, and the terrifyingly sterile scent of unchecked power. I sat on the edge of the cream leather seat, afraid that the grime of the Tsukiji market still clinging to my jeans would stain the pristine material. Beside me, Leo had already succumbed to the exhaustion of the adrenaline crash. His head rested heavily against my damp arm, his breathing deepening into the rhythm of sleep, clutching the empty plastic bag that had once held our entire net worth. My heart was hammering a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs, a physical pain that made it hard to swallow. I looked at the partition separating us from the driver, then at the woman sitting across from me. She was reading a tablet, the blue light illuminating the sharp, aristocratic angles of her face. She hadn't looked at me since the door clicked shut. The temperature in the car was set to a perfect, comfortable warmth, yet I was shivering, a cold sweat breaking out across my lower back. This wasn't a rescue. People like her didn't rescue people like me. This was an acquisition. "Stop vibrating, Kenji Sato," she said, without looking up from the screen. "It's distracting." My name sounded strange in her mouth, precise, weighed, and terrifyingly accurate. I hadn't told her my name. "How do you know who I am?" I asked, my voice sounding ragged and thin in the plush acoustic dampening of the cabin. She finally lowered the tablet. Her eyes, dark and endless as the Tokyo Bay at midnight, locked onto mine. I know that you were the head of logistics for Tanaka Shipping 4 years ago. I know you lost that job when you took excessive leave to care for a sick wife who eventually left you with a mountain of gambling debt. And I know that as of 3 hours ago, your landlord filed the paperwork to have you removed from your apartment. The air left my lungs. It was an invasion of privacy so swift and total, it felt like a physical assault. You ran a background check in the car. I run background checks on everyone who enters my orbit, she replied, crossing her legs. The silk of her trousers rustled, a sound of money. Efficiency is the only currency that matters, and currently, you are an inefficiency I am trying to categorize. The car slowed, gliding into the underground fortress of the Aoyama Grand Tower. We passed guards who bowed at 90-degree angles, their fear palpable even through the glass. "Where are we?" I asked. "My home," she said. "Your son purchased a service. Payment was accepted. Now the service must be rendered." We took a private elevator that moved so smoothly, I barely felt the ascent. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a penthouse that was less a home and more a museum of modern isolation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Tokyo skyline, the red lights of the towers blinking like distant stars. The floors were black marble, the furniture white leather. It was breathtaking, cold and silent. "Put the boy in the guest room. Second door on the left," she commanded, handing her jacket to a maid who appeared from the shadows. "Then come to my office, we have business." I carried Leo into the bedroom, laying him on a bed that cost more than my annual salary. He didn't wake. I kissed his forehead, whispering a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "I'm right here, buddy." I found her in the office, standing behind a desk that looked like a slab of obsidian. She was pouring an amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. "Drink," she said, sliding a glass across the marble surface. "Hibiki 30. It costs more than your debt." I took the glass but didn't drink. "Why are you doing this? Truly, a kid offers you change, and you take us in. It doesn't make sense." "Kaori," she said. "What?" "My name is Kaori. If you are going to live in my house, you will address me properly." She took a sip, watching me over the rim of the glass. "And I am doing this because I saw something in the street. You were afraid, Kenji, terrified, but when your son walked into traffic, you stopped shaking. You stepped forward." "Any father would," I said defensively. "No," she countered, her voice dropping. "Most men are cowards. They break under pressure. You endured. I value endurance." Just then, the heavy black satellite phone on her desk buzzed. The sound was jarring in the quiet room. Kaori's expression tightened. She hit the speaker button. "Speak," she commanded in English. A voice crackled through the line, rapid and aggressive. It was a man shouting over the background noise of wind and machinery. He wasn't speaking Japanese, and he wasn't speaking English anymore. He had switched to a dialect of Fujianese, a rough coastal vernacular often heard among the unauthorized crews on the container ships coming into Yokohama. I froze. I knew that dialect. I had spent 6 years on the docks, managing logistics for crews that didn't technically exist on paper. Kaori frowned, clearly struggling to follow the rapid-fire stream of words. She looked ready to hang up or switch back to English to assert dominance. "Wait," I said, stepping forward involuntarily. She shot me a glare that could have stopped a heart attack. "Be silent." "He's lying to you," I said quickly, my voice steady for the first time that night. Kaori's hand hovered over the end call button. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "What?" "The shipment," I said, pointing at the phone. "He's telling you in the dialect that the containers are stuck in customs. He's claiming the inspectors are demanding a higher bribe." "And?" she demanded, her eyes searching mine for deceit. "And he just told someone in the background, the guy laughing, that the crates are already iron rice bowl. That's dock slang. It means the job is secure, they have the goods on the truck. He's trying to squeeze you for a double fee while they drive off with your product." Kaori stared at me for a long, heavy second. Then she looked at the phone. She picked up the receiver, taking it off speaker. She spoke in flawless, icy Mandarin, but her tone was different now. Lethal. "If the trucks are already moving," she said into the receiver, her eyes locked on mine, "then asking for bribe money would be theft. And you know what I do to thieves, Chen." There was a strangled silence on the other end of the line, followed by a hasty, terrified apology. She hung up the phone with a slow, deliberate click. The silence that followed was charged with electricity. Kaori walked around the desk, her movements predatory and fluid. She stopped inches from me. I could smell her perfume, dark florals mixed with tobacco smoke. "You speak Minnan," she stated. "I worked the graveyard shift at the Yokohama docks," I replied, holding her gaze. "You learn to listen if you want to keep your teeth." "You weren't just a laborer," she murmured, circling me slowly. "You were logistics. Why is a man who can decode a smuggling dialect in real time scrubbing floors at Tsukiji?" "Because nobody hires a man with my debt," I said, the shame burning my neck. "And nobody hires a man who has to leave at 3:00 p.m. every day to pick up his son." She walked back around to face me, leaning against the edge of her desk. She looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was calculation. She was mentally stripping me down and rebuilding me as something else. "You have a skill set," she said softly. "You have eyes that see details others miss. You have ears that hear lies. And you have a debt that is drowning you." "I'll pay it back," I said automatically. "You don't have time," she cut in. "You have 48 hours before you're on the street. And your debt. It isn't just money, is it? It's leverage." I looked away, staring at the city lights. My wife. She didn't just gamble. She borrowed from the Kudokai. When she left, they transferred the debt to me. They said if I missed a payment, they wouldn't come for me. They'd wait for Leo at the school gate. My voice broke on the last word. I hadn't said it out loud to anyone. The terror of it, the constant gnawing fear that every time I was 5 minutes late, I would find an empty playground. That was the real reason I couldn't sleep. That was why I looked at the eviction notice with despair. I felt a hand on my chin. Kaori forced me to look at her. Her skin was cool, her grip firm. "The Kudokai," she repeated, the name tasting like ash. "Low-level scavengers. They lack vision." She didn't let go of my face. "You protected your son tonight. You offered your pride to me in exchange for his happiness. That is a rare currency, Kenji. Loyalty." She released me and picked up her cell phone, a sleek, modern device this time, and dialed a number. "It's me," she said. "The Kudokai debt for Kenji Sato. Buy it. Tonight. Yes, all of it. And send a detail to the elementary school in Minato. If anyone looks at the boy wrong, break their legs." She hung up before the person on the other end could answer. My knees actually gave out. I slumped onto one of the white leather chairs, my head spinning. I just acquired your debt," she said, turning to face me. "You don't owe them anymore, you owe me." "I can't pay you," I whispered. "I have 300 yen. "I don't want your money," she said, walking toward me until she was standing between my spread knees. The proximity was overwhelming. I could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "I have enough money. What I need is someone who understands the docks, someone who speaks the languages of the people who move my product, someone who isn't part of the family and therefore isn't trying to kill me to take my seat." She leaned down, placing her hands on the arms of the chair, trapping me. "I am offering you a position, Kenji. You will handle my logistics. You will be my eyes and ears. You will live here. Leo will go to a private school where the security is absolute." It sounded like a dream. It sounded like salvation. But I looked at her, at the danger radiating off her like heat from a fire, and I knew the cost. "And if I refuse?" I asked. She smiled, and it was a terrifying, beautiful thing. "You won't. Because you're a good father. And a good father doesn't turn down a deal that saves his son's life." She was right. The trap was perfect. It was gilded, comfortable, and made of silk, but it was a trap nonetheless. "When do I start?" I asked. "You already have," she said, straightening up. "Go sleep. Tomorrow we go to the port. I have a shipment arriving, and I want you to tell me if the captain is lying." She walked toward the door, stopping at the threshold. "Oh, and Kenji." I looked up. "Yes?" That smile your son wanted to buy. She looked back at me, her eyes unreadable. Work hard enough, and maybe I'll give you a reason to use it. She flicked the lights off, leaving me in the glow of the city. I walked to the window and pressed my hand against the glass. I didn't know then that I would never return to my old life. I didn't know that by accepting her protection, I had just placed myself and my son in the center of a target. But as I looked at the reflection of the room behind me, I realized something else. I wasn't just afraid. I was intrigued. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The morning after my world ended and began anew, I woke up not to the sound of rain on corrugated metal, but to the silence of soundproofed glass. For a moment, suspended in the disorienting comfort of 800 thread-count sheets, I forgot where I was. Then the memories of the night before, the rain, the Maybach, Kari kneeling in the mud, came rushing back, hitting me with the force of a physical blow. I sat up, expecting to find myself back in the cramped 1K apartment, but instead I was in a room that felt more like a gallery than a living space. The walls were adorned with minimalist sumi-e paintings, stark black ink on rice paper depicting mountains and storms. My clothes, laundered and pressed while I slept, lay folded on a chair. Beside them sat a note on heavy cream cardstock, written in elegant, sharp kanji. Breakfast is at 8:00. Do not be late. We leave for Kamakura at 9:00. I checked on Leo. He was still asleep, buried under a mountain of pillows, clutching Mr. Hops. He looked peaceful, the tension that usually tightened his small jaw gone. I decided to let him sleep a little longer. At 7:55 a.m. I entered the dining room. It was a vast space dominated by a long table of polished keyaki wood. Kaori was already there, dressed not in a suit this time, but in a dark grey kimono of casual silk, though the way she wore it made it look like armor. She was reading a newspaper, an actual paper one, while sipping green tea. "Good morning, Kenji," she said without looking up. "You slept 6 hours, better than the 3 you average." "How do you know my sleeping habits?" as I asked, taking the seat opposite her. A silent server placed a traditional Japanese breakfast before me, grilled salmon, miso soup, rice and pickles. "I told you, I like efficiency. Knowing your fatigue levels helps me calculate your utility." She folded the paper and looked at me. Her eyes were less terrifying in the morning light, but no less intense. "Eat. You look like a famine victim. We travel in an hour." "Travel where?" "You said Kamakura in the note." "My main residence," she explained, picking up a piece of pickled daikon with her chopsticks. "This penthouse is merely a workspace, a convenience for late nights in the city. Leo cannot grow up in a glass box. He needs a garden. He needs air that doesn't smell of exhaust and ambition." The mention of Leo's needs silenced me. I ate. The food was incredible, simple, but prepared with a perfection that made the salmon melt on my tongue. It was the first proper meal I'd had in months. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, we descended to the garage. This time we didn't take the sedan. A black SUV with reinforced plating waited, surrounded by 3 other vehicles. As we strapped Leo in, he was wide awake now, clutching a new toy robot that had mysteriously appeared on his bedside table. I noticed the security detail had doubled. The drive to Kamakura took an hour. We left the dense grey sprawl of Tokyo behind, trading skyscrapers for the rolling green hills and jagged coastline of the Shonan area. Kaori spent the drive on her phone, speaking in rapid-fire bursts of Japanese, English, and Mandarin. I listened, my old instincts kicking in. She wasn't just running a business, she was conducting a symphony of illicit trade. I heard mentions of northern ports, unions, and customs interference. She was managing supply chains that spanned continents. We turned off the main coastal road and began to climb a winding private drive lined with ancient cedar trees. The air here was different, sharp with sea salt and pine resin. We passed a gatehouse manned by 2 guards who bowed so low their foreheads nearly touched the asphalt. "Welcome to the estate," Kaori said as the trees cleared. The house wasn't a mansion, it was a fortress disguised as a temple. It was a sprawling compound of traditional architecture, low sloping roofs, dark wood beams, and white plaster walls integrated seamlessly with modern glass structures that jutted out over the cliffside overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It felt ancient, heavy with history and secrets. As we stepped out of the car, the silence was profound, broken only by the distant roar of the surf and the wind in the pines. "Kenji-san, welcome." A round-faced woman in her 60s bustled out of the main entrance. She wore a traditional apron over a kimono and had a smile that seemed out of place in this world of sharp edges. "This is Hana," Kaori introduced, her tone softening slightly. "She runs the house. She has been with my family since before I was born. If you need anything, you ask her. If you disobey her, I will know." "Kaori-chan, stop frightening the poor man," Hana scolded, bowing to me. "He looks like a strong wind would blow him over. And this must be the little master." She beamed at Leo, who hid behind my leg. "This is Leo," I said, resting my hand on his head. "He's a little shy." "Come, come," Hana cooed. "I have made daifuku, strawberry ones." Leo's eyes widened. He looked at me for permission. I nodded, and he took Hana's hand, disappearing into the depths of the house. "Come," Kaori said to me. "I will show you your quarters." We walked through corridors floored with tatami that smelled of dry grass. The walls were lined with armor, samurai suits from the Edo period, their face masks twisted into eternal snarls. "My ancestors," Kaori noted, seeing me look. "They were retainers to the shogun. Violence is a heritage in this family, Kenji. We just changed the weapons." She led me to a wing of the house that faced the ocean. She slid open a door to reveal a suite that was larger than my entire former life. It had a private garden, a stone bath, and a view of the horizon that stretched forever. "Leo's room is connected through that door," she pointed. "You will be close, but you will have your own space. Privacy is a luxury I assume you haven't had in a long time." I looked at the room, then at her. "Why? Why all this? A job is one thing. This is too much." "I don't do things by halves," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "If you are mine, you are mine. I take care of my own. Unpack. Lunch is at 1:00. Afterward, we have work to do." The next few hours were a blur of adjustment. I unpacked the few pitiful belongings we had: Leo's worn clothes, my 2 shirts, the photo of his mother I kept hidden in a book. They looked pathetic in the massive cedar closets. At lunch, the dynamic shifted again. We ate on a terrace overlooking the sea. Leo was already there, his face smeared with red bean paste from the daifuku. He was sitting on a cushion, kicking his legs, chattering away to Kaori. I stopped in the doorway, stunned. The Yakuza queen, the woman who ordered beatings over the phone, was listening intently to a 5-year-old explain the complex backstory of his stuffed bear. "And then Mr. Hops lost his eye because he fought a dragon," Leo said seriously. "A dragon?" Kaori asked, her voice devoid of its usual chill. She was leaning forward, her chin resting on her hand. "Was it a big dragon? Huge, green, like the one in the book." "Brave bear," Kaori nodded solemnly. "Brave warriors often carry scars, Leo. It is proof they survived." She reached out and adjusted the collar of his shirt, a gesture so gentle it made my chest ache. She wasn't stiff or awkward with him. She treated him with a serious respect that children crave. "Daddy," Leo spotted me. "Kaori-san has a pond with fish that are gold, real gold." "Koi," Kaori corrected, looking up at me. The softness vanished from her face instantly, replaced by the mask. "Sit, Kenji. We have much to discuss." Throughout the meal, I watched them. Leo was happier than I had seen him in 2 years. He laughed, he ate. He wasn't looking at me with those worried adult eyes, checking to see if I was stressed about money. And Kaori. She watched him like he was a rare, precious artifact she had just acquired and intended to guard with her life. "You're good with him," I said quietly, after Leo had run off to chase a dragonfly in the garden. Kaori took a sip of tea, her gaze following him. "Children are honest. They haven't learned to lie effectively yet. I like honesty." "Do you have children?" I asked. The question slipped out before I could stop it. It was a violation of the employer-employee boundary, but the atmosphere on the terrace felt different. Kaori went still. The wind seemed to die down around us. She placed her teacup down with a deliberate click. "No," she said, "I do not." I'm sorry, I said quickly. I shouldn't have asked. I had a son, she interrupted, her voice flat, devoid of inflection. 30 years ago. He would have been your age. I froze. Kaori. His name was Hiro, she continued, looking out at the ocean, her eyes seeing something far beyond the horizon. I was young, not the head of the family yet, just a daughter. My father had enemies. They didn't come for him. They came for me, through Hiro. She turned to look at me, and the pain in her eyes was so raw, so ancient, it took my breath away. It wasn't the cold fury I had seen before. It was a crater of grief that had never filled. They took him from the park, she whispered. 5 minutes. The nanny turned her head for 5 minutes. We paid the ransom. We did everything they asked. But they wanted to send a message to my father. She stopped. She didn't need to finish. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I knew that darkness. I knew the fear of the empty playground. The difference was, my fear was a possibility. Hers was a history. I buried him on a Tuesday, she said, her voice regaining its steel edge. On Wednesday, I killed the men who took him. On Thursday, I took my father's seat at the table. I vowed that no child under my protection would ever be touched again. She looked at Leo, who was now crouching by the koi pond, fascinated by the fish. When your son offered me his money, she said softly, he didn't ask for a toy. He asked for his father's happiness. It was pure. It reminded me that there are things in this world worth burning cities for. I reached across the table. I didn't think. I just laid my hand over hers. Her skin was cool, her fingers tense. She flinched, surprised by the contact, but she didn't pull away. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I understand. You do, she said, looking at our hands. That is why you are here, Kenji, because you know what it is to love something more than your own life. That makes you dangerous, and that makes you loyal. She slowly withdrew her hand, the moment of vulnerability closing like a vault door. Come. She stood up, smoothing her kimono. Emotional indulgence is over. We have work. I need you to translate the shipping manifests from the Taiwanese crew. I suspect they are skimming off the top. 3 weeks passed. Life at the Kamakura estate settled into a rhythm that was both bizarre and seductive. My days were a mix of high-stakes logistical analysis and domestic tranquility. I would spend the mornings with Kari in her study, going over spreadsheets, decoding encrypted messages from smugglers, and listening to wiretaps. My background in legitimate shipping logistics, combined with my knowledge of the darker side of the docks, proved invaluable. I found 3 leaks in her supply chain in the first week alone, saving her millions of yen. Kaori was a demanding boss. She expected perfection, but she was also fair. When I found the errors, she didn't praise me with empty words. She simply nodded and poured me a glass of that expensive scotch. It was the highest compliment she could give. In the afternoons, I was free to be with Leo. We explored the beaches, hiked the hills, and played in the garden. Leo was thriving. He had gained weight, his cheeks were rosy, and he laughed constantly. Hannah, the housekeeper, doted on him, feeding him sweets and telling him stories. But it was the evenings that were the most dangerous. After Leo went to sleep, Kari and I would often sit on the terrace, the sound of the ocean below us. We would talk, at first about business, but slowly, about other things. She asked about my wife, listening without judgment as I explained the slow erosion of our marriage, the addiction that consumed her. I asked her about the art in the house, about her travels. I watched her. I couldn't help it. I watched the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she found something amusing, though she rarely laughed out loud. I watched the elegance of her hands as she poured tea. I watched the way she commanded the room, even when it was just the two of us. She began to change me, too. The first change was the clothes. One morning, I found a row of suits in my closet. Italian wool tailored perfectly to my measurements. No more frayed cuffs. No more cheap polyester. Wear them, she had said when I tried to protest. You represent me now. You cannot look like a vagrant. I put on the charcoal grey suit, the white shirt, the silk tie. I looked in the mirror and saw a man I hadn't seen in years. A man who looked capable. Dangerous, even. That evening, as I walked into the study, Kaori looked up from her desk. She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes swept over me, lingering on the line of my shoulders, the fit of the jacket. "Better," she murmured, her voice dropping a fraction. "Much better." She stood up and walked over to me. She reached out and adjusted my tie, her knuckles grazing my chest. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through me that was terrifyingly intense. I could smell her scent, sandalwood and rain. I could feel the heat radiating from her body. "You clean up well, Kenji," she said, looking up into my eyes. "Thank you, Kaori," I replied, my voice rough. "The staff respects you," she said, her hand lingering on my tie. "They see how you work. They see how you are with Leo. You fit here more than I expected. I like it here," I admitted. "I feel safe." "Good," she whispered. "That is the point." She stepped back, the moment breaking, but the air between us remained charged. The tension grew with every passing day. It was in the glances across the dinner table. It was in the way her hand would brush mine when we exchanged documents. It was in the silence that wasn't empty, but full of things unsaid. The staff noticed. Hana would smile knowingly when she found us working late together. The guards treated me not just as an employee, but as someone close to the throne. Then the external world crashed in. It was a Tuesday, exactly 1 month after we arrived. We were in the study. I was translating a negotiation with a Russian syndicate when Kaori's personal phone rang. The melody was different, sharp, urgent. She answered it. Her face, usually so composed, went pale. "When?" she snapped. "Are you sure?" She listened for another moment, then slammed the phone down onto the obsidian desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "What is it?" I asked, standing up. "The Seryukai," she hissed, her hands gripping the edge of the desk until her knuckles turned white. "My rivals in the north, they know." "Know what?" "About the shipment." "About you," she said, looking at me with a fierce intensity. "And Leo." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "They know I have taken in a man and a child. They know I have. Attachments. They think it makes me weak. They think I have gone soft." She walked around the desk, moving with the restless energy of a caged tiger. "They sent a message. They burned down one of my warehouses in Yokohama. But that wasn't the point. They left a toy among the ashes, a blue plastic pig." I felt the room spin. "Leo's pig, but that's here in his room." "A replica," she said. "A threat. They are telling me they can get close. They are telling me they know what matters to me." "I have to leave," I said, panic rising in my throat. "I have to take him and go. If we stay, we put you in danger. We make you vulnerable." "You are not going anywhere," Kaori shouted, the volume of her voice shocking me. She crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed the lapels of my jacket, pulling me close. Her eyes were blazing with a mixture of fury and fear. "Do you think I would let you leave now?" she demanded, shaking me slightly. "Do you think I would let them hunt you down? You are under my protection, Kenji. That means something. That means everything. But we are a liability," I argued, gripping her wrists. "You said it yourself, attachments are dangerous." "I don't care," she breathed, her face inches from mine. "Let them come. Let them all come. I will burn the city to the ground before I let them touch a hair on his head. Or yours." The admission hung in the air between us. "Or yours." She realized what she had said. Her grip on my jacket loosened, but she didn't pull away. We were standing chest to chest, breathing hard, the adrenaline of the threat mixing with the simmering tension of the past weeks. "Kaori," I whispered. The study was dim, lit only by the desk lamp and the moonlight from the terrace. The world outside was dangerous, filled with men who wanted to kill us. But in here, there was only this. The heat of her body, the scent of sandalwood, the look in her eyes that was no longer guarded. "I have spent 30 years building walls," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. 30 years of being ice, of being the queen. And you. You and that boy. You walked in with 300 yen and broke them down in a month." "I didn't mean to," I said. "I know," she said. "That is why it worked." She looked at my lips. I looked at hers. The pull was magnetic, undeniable. I moved my hand from her wrist to her waist, pulling her closer. She gasped softly, her hands sliding up my chest to wrap around my neck. We leaned in. I could feel her breath on my skin. I wanted her. God, I wanted her. Not because she saved me, not because she was powerful, but because beneath the armor, she was the loneliest woman I had ever met, and I was the only one who saw it. Our lips were a millimeter apart. I closed my eyes, ready to cross the line, ready to damn the consequences. "Kaori-sama!" The door to the study burst open. We sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Takahashi, the head of security, stood in the doorway, his face grim, a submachine gun strapped to his chest. He looked from me to Corey, his eyes widening slightly, but he said nothing about our proximity. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, bowing quickly, "but we have movement at the perimeter. The sensors in the lower woods have been tripped. Multiple targets." The moment of intimacy shattered instantly, replaced by the cold, hard reality of war. Kaori's face transformed. The vulnerable woman vanished. The Yakuza queen returned. "How many?" she asked, her voice like ice. "At least 12. Professionals." "Secure the boy," she ordered, moving behind her desk and opening a hidden drawer. She pulled out a heavy matte black pistol. She checked the magazine with a practiced, lethal efficiency. "Take him to the panic room. Hana goes with him." "And Kenji-san?" Takahashi asked. Kaori looked at me. She held out a second gun. It was a Glock 19. Simple, reliable. "Do you know how to use this?" she asked. I took the weapon. It felt heavy and cold in my hand. I thought of the docks. I thought of the nights I had stood guard over illegal shipments, praying I wouldn't have to fight. "I know how to point and shoot," I said. "Good enough," she said. "Stay close to me. Do not leave my sight." "I'm not leaving you," I said, meeting her gaze. "Not now. Not ever." A flicker of that heat returned to her eyes, brief but intense. "Then let's go." We moved into the hallway. The alarm klaxons began to wail, a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the floorboards. Outside, the night was no longer peaceful. It was alive with shadows. I checked the safety on the gun. I thought of Leo, safe in the panic room. I thought of the woman walking in front of me, walking into fire to protect us. I didn't know if we would survive the night. But as I followed the Yakuza queen into the dark, I knew one thing for certain. I was done running. I was done being the victim. Tonight, I fought. For my son. And for her. The world didn't end with a warning. It ended with the sound of shattering porcelain and the roar of automatic fire. One moment, I was following Kaori down the hallway, the weight of the Glock 19 unfamiliar and heavy in my sweating palm. The next, the sliding paper doors to our left exploded inward. Wood splintered, glass shattered. The serenity of the corridor vanished, replaced instantly by a tunnel of noise and lead. "Get down!" Kaori screamed. She slammed her shoulder into my chest, knocking me backward into an alcove, just as bullets chewed up the tatami mats where I had been standing. The air filled instantly with the acrid stench of cordite and the dust of pulverized drywall. "Stay low," she hissed, her eyes scanning the smoke. They breached the perimeter. "Leo," I choked out, my ears ringing, "is the panic room secure?" "It is impenetrable," she said, though her knuckles were white on the grip of her pistol. "Focus on breathing, Kenji. If you panic, you die." We moved. Kaori was a phantom, moving through the chaos with terrifying grace. She fired twice, pop, pop, and a shadow at the end of the hall dropped. There was no hesitation, no remorse, just efficiency. I scrambled behind her, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't the movies. It was loud, confusing, and smelled like death. We reached the junction leading to the west wing. 3 men in tactical gear emerged from the smoke, their faces covered by balaclavas. "Seiryu-kai," one of them shouted. Kaori didn't flinch. She dropped to one knee, firing. I raised my gun, my hands shaking violently. I squeezed the trigger, the recoil jarring my arm up. I didn't hit anyone, but the suppression fire forced them back behind a pillar. "Move to the library," Kaori commanded. "We can flank them." "I'm with you," I yelled back. We sprinted. Bullets whizzed past us, snapping the air like angry hornets. We burst into the library, a massive room of dark wood. Kaori slammed the heavy oak doors shut and locked them. It was a momentary reprieve. "Are you hit?" she demanded, grabbing my face, her eyes wild. "No," I gasped. "You?" "I am fine." She checked her magazine. "2 rounds left, give me your spare." I fumbled with my pocket, handing her the magazine. "Kaori, there are too many." "Quality over quantity," she said, reloading with a sharp clack. "They are hired guns. I am protecting my home. The motivation is different." The doorknob rattled. Then a heavy boot kicked the wood. Splinters flew. "Get behind the desk," she ordered, pointing to the massive mahogany table. "I'm not hiding while you fight. This isn't a negotiation, Kenji. Get behind the..." The doors blew open. The explosion threw us both to the floor. My ears screamed. Through the ringing, I saw a figure step through the smoke. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was older, wearing a white suit that mirrored Kaori's style, stained with soot. He held a submachine gun casually at his hip. It was Jin, the lieutenant of the Seryukai. "Kaori-san," Jin smiled, his teeth yellow. "You need better security." Kaori rose slowly from the floor, dust coating her hair. She didn't raise her gun. She stood tall, unarmed in appearance, though her pistol was on the floor near her foot. "Jin," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You broke my door. That is an antique." "I'm going to break more than your furniture," Jin laughed. He looked at me, cowering near the overturned chair. "And this? This is the pet? The logistics man?" "Leave him out of this," Kaori said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "This is between families." "Oh, it is," Jin sneered, stepping closer. "But pets are messy. They make you weak. The Seryukai thinks you've lost your edge, Kaori, playing mother to a stray dog and his pup." "We heard about the boy." Kaori went very still. "If you mention him again, I will cut out your tongue." "You won't do anything," Jin said, raising the gun and aiming it directly at my chest. "Because you're going to watch him die first. Say goodbye, logistics man." "No," I shouted, scrambling for my dropped gun. But I was too slow. The barrel was black and endless. I saw Jin's finger tighten on the trigger. "Jin!" Kaori's voice wasn't a scream, it was a thunderclap. "Look at me." He flicked his eyes to her. That was his mistake. Kaori didn't dive for her gun. She moved toward him. In one fluid motion, she pulled a hidden blade from her sleeve, a tanto knife sharp enough to split a hair. She closed the distance before he could swing the barrel back to her. She drove the blade into his forearm, pinning his trigger hand against his chest. He screamed, dropping the gun. She didn't stop. She spun, sweeping his legs, and as he fell, she was on top of him. The knife flashed again. Silence. It was over in 3 seconds. I stared, horrified and awestruck. Kaori stood up, breathing heavily, blood on her white shirt that wasn't hers. She looked at the body, then at me. Her face was a mask of cold fury, but her hands were trembling. "I told you," she whispered. "Quality over quantity." The silence of the library was heavier than the gunfire had been. The rest of the security team swept the house minutes later. Takahashi found us there. Kaori standing over the intruder, me sitting against the bookshelf. "Clear," Takahashi reported, his face pale. "The others have fled. The police are 5 minutes out. We have paid the captain to delay them, but we need to move." "Take the body," Kaori said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Clean this mess. I will be in the safe house. And Kenji-san? He comes with me." We moved to the underground bunker, a reinforced steel suite beneath the wine cellar. It was sterile, white, and cold. As soon as the heavy steel door locked behind us, the adrenaline that had been holding Kaori together evaporated. She stumbled. "Kaori!" I dropped my gun and caught her before she hit the floor. "I'm fine," she gasped, clutching my arms. I'm fine." I guided her to the leather sofa. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't unbutton her ruined shirt. "Let me," I said softly. "It's not my blood," she said, pushing my hands away weakly. "Kenji, don't. You shouldn't touch me. I'm filth." "You're alive," I said firmly, brushing her hands aside. "And you saved me." I unbuttoned her collar. There was a graze on her shoulder, a burn from a passing bullet she hadn't even mentioned. It was bleeding sluggishly. "You're hurt," I said, my voice thick. "It's a scratch. Sit still." I found the first aid kit. I came back with antiseptic and gauze. She sat on the edge of the sofa, staring at the blank wall, her eyes glassy. I knelt between her legs, dabbing the wound. She hissed as the alcohol touched the raw skin. "Sorry," I whispered. "Why didn't you run?" she asked suddenly. She looked down at me, her dark eyes searching my face. "When the doors blew, you tried to reach for your gun, you tried to fight him. He was going to kill you," I said simply. "I can handle myself. You are a civilian. You are supposed to run." "I'm not a civilian anymore," I said, taping the gauze down. "I'm your logistics manager, and I couldn't leave you." "You idiot," she breathed, her voice cracking. "You stupid, loyal idiot. Do you know how close that was?" "I don't care." "I care." She grabbed my face with her good hand, her fingers digging into my cheeks. "I care, Kenji, when he pointed that gun at you." I froze. For the first time in 30 years, I froze. I didn't think about the family. I didn't think about the business. I thought, if he dies, the light goes out. I stared at her. The Iron Queen. She was crying because I had almost been hurt. "Kaori," I whispered. "I can't do this," she sobbed. "I can't watch you die. I've killed for less than this insult, but for you, I would burn the whole world down, and that terrifies me." "You're not going to watch me die," I said, covering her hand with mine. "You don't understand," she cried. "You've become everything. The way you look at Leo, the way you understand the silence, the way you look at me. Not like a monster, but like a woman." "Because you are a woman," I said fiercely. "You're the most incredible woman I've ever met." "I am a monster," she whispered. "Look at me. Look at the blood on my hands." "I see it," I said, "and I'm still here." I stood up, pulling her to her feet. The distance between us vanished. The smell of cordite and blood was still there, but beneath it was the sandalwood scent of her, the heat of her skin. "Kenji," she warned, but her voice was breathless. "If you cross this line—" "I crossed it the night I got in your car," I said. I didn't wait for permission this time. I leaned in and crashed my lips against hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was the release of weeks of tension, fear, and suppressed desire. She made a noise in the back of her throat, half sob, half moan, and wrapped her arms around my neck, pulling me down to her. Her lips were softer than I had imagined, but her kiss was demanding. She tasted of scotch and mint and iron. I grabbed her waist, pulling her flush against me, needing to feel that she was real, that she was solid. "Kaori," I murmured against her mouth. "Don't talk," she commanded, biting my lower lip. "Just don't talk." We moved together blindly, stumbling back until we hit the wall. Her hands were in my hair, gripping tight. My hands roamed over the silk of her ruined shirt, tracing the muscles of her back, the curve of her waist. It was frantic, a validation of survival. We were alive. We were here. We were ours. I kissed her jaw, her neck, the pulse point that hammered frantically beneath her skin. She arched into me, her composure completely shattered. "I want you," she whispered, her voice raw. "God help me, Kenji, I want you." "I'm yours," I promised. "I've been yours since the rain." She pulled back slightly, her eyes dark and blown wide with desire. She looked at me with a vulnerability that stole the air from my lungs. "Then show me," she said. We didn't make it to the bedroom. We collapsed onto the leather sofa, a tangle of limbs and discarded clothes. The world outside, the police, the seryukai, the danger, ceased to exist. There was only the heat of her skin, the sound of her breath, and the way she whispered my name like a prayer in the dark. The morning light filtering through the high ventilation windows was grey and sterile. I woke up with a stiff neck, my arm pinned beneath Kaori's sleeping form. She looked younger in her sleep, the lines of command smoothed away from her forehead. For a long time I just watched her breathe. I traced the faint scar on her collarbone with my eyes. I thought about the knife. I thought about the blood. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a second she looked confused. Then, the memory of the night returned, and the mask slammed back into place. But it didn't fit quite as tightly as before. She sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. She didn't look at me immediately. "We need to leave," she said, her voice raspy. "Okay," I said, propping myself up on an elbow. "Where do we go? The penthouse?" "No," she said, finally turning to face me. Her expression was pained. "You need to leave. You and Leo." I sat up, the cold air hitting my chest. "What?" "I have a plane waiting at Haneda," she said, speaking quickly. "It will take you to Vancouver. I have a safe house there, new identities, a trust fund for Leo. You will never have to work again. You will be safe." "You're sending us away?" I asked, my voice rising. "I am saving you," she snapped. "Yesterday was a warning, Kenji. The Seryukai won't stop. I cannot fight a war with my heart exposed." "So that's it." I swung my legs off the sofa, grabbing my pants. "We sleep together. And you fire me?" "This isn't about sex." She stood up, the blanket falling away. "This is about survival. If you stay, you are a target. If you stay, Leo is a target." "I want him to have a father who didn't run away," I shouted back. "You wouldn't be running, you would be being smart." Her voice softened. She walked over to me, placing her hands on my bare chest. "Kenji, please. I can't lose you." "And then what?" I asked, covering her hands with mine. "You live alone in this fortress. You turn back into ice." "It is my fate," she whispered. "Please, take the deal. Go to Vancouver." I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. Not for herself, but for me. It was the most selfless thing anyone had ever offered me. She was willing to break her own heart to ensure I kept beating. I thought about Leo. I thought about the quiet streets of Vancouver, safe, boring, easy. Then I thought about the way Leo looked at her. I thought about the woman who knelt in the mud for $3. "No," I said. She blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated firmly. "I'm not going." "Kenji, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "You think you protect people by pushing them away. But you're wrong. You need me." "I don't need anyone." "You need a logistics manager," I said, a small smile touching my lips. "You need someone who knows the dialect. And you need someone to remind you that you're human." I stepped closer, wrapping my arms around her waist. "I'm not leaving, Kaori. I love you." The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. She gasped, her eyes filling with tears again. "You are a fool," she whispered, resting her forehead against my chest. "A stubborn, reckless fool." "I know," I said, kissing the top of her head. "But I'm your fool. So what's the plan?" She took a deep breath, shuddering once, and then she pulled back. The vulnerability evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp determination, but her eyes remained warm. "If you stay," she said, "there is no going back. We are at war." "I know." "Then we finish it," she said. "The Seryukai attacked my home. They threatened my family." She looked up at me, her gaze fierce. "We do not forgive. We do not forget." "What do we do?" I asked. She walked to the pile of clothes, picking up her ruined shirt. She tossed it aside and grabbed a fresh robe from the emergency locker. She tied the sash tight, transforming back into the queen. "We go to the port," she said. "We stop playing defense. We cut off their supply, we starve them out, and then I take Jin's boss's head." She turned to the door, punching in the code. The heavy steel bolts retracted with a loud clank. "Get dressed, Kenji," she commanded, looking back at me with a smirk that was all danger and promise. "You have a shipment to intercept." "Yes, ma'am," I said. As the door opened, letting in the sounds of the recovering house, I knew that the man I was yesterday was dead. The man who counted coins in the dark was gone. I was standing in the light of a brewing storm, and for the first time in my life I wasn't afraid of the thunder. Tomorrow everything would change. But as I watched her walk out the door, spine straight and head high, I knew we would change it together. The morning mist over the port of Yokohama was thick, tasting of salt and diesel, a scent that used to remind me of poverty and exhaustion. Now, standing on the observation deck of Warehouse 4, it smelled like opportunity. I adjusted the cuffs of my bespoke charcoal suit, armored lining, Italian wool, and looked at the tablet in my hand. Beside me, Kaori stood like a monolith in a black trench coat, her gaze fixed on the shipping containers below. We weren't hiding in bunkers anymore. We were standing in the open, claiming the ground beneath our feet. It had been 3 days since the attack on the estate. 3 days of little sleep, constant movement, and a shift in our dynamic that felt as permanent as tectonic plates settling after a quake. We weren't just lovers, and I wasn't just an employee. We were partners. "The manifests for the Northern Star are wrong," I said, my voice steady over the clamor of the cranes. "The Seryukai are trying to route their weapons through a shell company in Busan, but they messed up the weight declarations. It's too light for electronics. Customs will flag it." Kaori turned to me, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "And if we tip off the Port Authority anonymously?" "Then their shipment is seized," I replied, tapping the screen. "And if we buy the debt of the shell company, which is currently over-leveraged, we can legally claim the contents of the containers once the fines settle." "You are ruthless, Kenji," she murmured, stepping closer. She reached out, her gloved hand straightening my lapel. It was a possessive, intimate gesture that made the terrifying Takahashi, standing 10 feet away, politely avert his eyes. "I had a good teacher," I said, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her leather-clad palm. "We are not just hurting them," she said, her eyes darkening with satisfaction. "We are humiliating them. Jin's death was a message. This is an eviction notice." I laughed, a dry sound. "I know a thing or two about eviction notices." "Not anymore," she promised, her thumb brushing my cheekbone. "Never again." We stood there for a moment in comfortable silence, the chaos of the port moving around us like a river around 2 stones. I didn't feel the urge to run. I didn't feel the crushing weight of inadequacy. I felt capable. I felt dangerous. And looking at the queen of the Tokyo underworld, I realized that for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. The war with the Seryukai didn't end with a shootout in the streets. It ended in a boardroom in Marunouchi 2 weeks later. I sat at Kaori's right hand, a position that sent a ripple of unease through the assembled Oyabun. They weren't used to seeing an outsider, a civilian, at the high table, but Kaori didn't care for tradition when tradition was inefficient. She cared about results, and I had delivered them. Using the data I harvested from the port logistics and the decrypted ledgers, we had systematically dismantled the Seryukai's revenue streams. We froze their assets, redirected their shipments, and exposed their bribes. They weren't dead, they were bankrupt, and in this world, poverty was a slower, more painful death than a bullet. Across the table sat Saito, the patriarch of the rival clan. He looked tired, defeated. "The terms are simple," Kaori said, her voice echoing in the minimalist room. "You cede the northern routes to my organization. You liquidate your holdings in the Minato district, and you leave Tokyo permanently." Saito grit his teeth, his eyes flicking to me. "You let a clerk dictate terms to a boss." "This clerk," Kaori said, her voice dropping to a glacial chill, "just cost you 3 billion yen in 10 days. Show him respect, or I will let him finish the job and leave you with nothing but the suit on your back." Saito looked at me. I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. I held his gaze with the calm indifference of a man who had already faced the worst and survived. "Sign it," I said quietly. "It's the best deal you're going to get." He signed. 6 weeks later, the remnants of the Seryukai were absorbed into Kaori's organization. Saito was found retired in a quiet fishing village in Hokkaido. There was no bloodshed, no headlines. Just a silent, suffocating efficiency that solidified Kaori's reign as absolute. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt some moral conflict about destroying men's lives with spreadsheets and shipping lanes. But I remembered the blue plastic pig in the ashes. I remembered the gun pointed at my chest. I remembered the fear in Leo's eyes. I didn't feel guilty, I felt relieved. Justice, I realized, wasn't about the law, it was about balance. And we had balanced the scales. Life settled into a new, strange and beautiful pattern. I was officially named the Director of International Operations for the legitimate arm of the family business. It was a title that commanded respect, a salary that was obscene, and a workload that kept my mind sharp. I wasn't a kept man, I was a key architect of the empire. We moved permanently to the Kamakura estate, though we kept the penthouse for nights in the city. The estate, once a fortress of solitude, transformed. It became a home. Leo was the catalyst. He started at a private international school in Yokohama, driven there every morning by a security detail he had charmed into submission. He was thriving. The shadows under his eyes were gone, replaced by the healthy glow of a child who spent his afternoons running in the sea air. He took kendo lessons from Takahashi, wielding a bamboo sword with a seriousness that made Kaori smile, that rare, genuine smile. My integration into the family was total. The staff no longer looked at me with suspicion. Hana, the housekeeper, now asked my opinion on the dinner menu. The guards saluted me not because they had to, but because they saw how I stood beside their queen. One afternoon I came home early to find the main hall transformed. Tutors, tailors, and business associates moved through the space, but in the center of it all was Leo sitting on the floor with Kaori. They were working on a massive Lego set, a castle. "That tower is structurally unsound," Kaori was saying seriously, examining a plastic brick. "But it looks cool," Leo argued, holding up a dragon. "And the dragon protects it." "Defenses must be practical, Leo," she countered, though she placed the dragon exactly where he wanted it. I leaned against the doorframe, loosening my tie. I looked at my son, wearing clothes that fit, laughing with a woman who could order a hit with a phone call. I looked at the comfort in their postures. We weren't a normal family. We never would be. There were guns in the safe room and armored plating in the cars. There were secrets we kept and lines we didn't cross. But as I watched Kaori gently guide Leo's hand to snap a piece into place, I realized that normal was overrated. I had financial security. My son had a future, and I had a partner who saw the darkest parts of me and didn't look away. I hadn't lost myself in her world. I had evolved. I had become the man I needed to be to survive in it. That evening, after Leo was asleep, we sat on the terrace overlooking the ocean. The autumn air was crisp, reminiscent of the night we met, but without the biting chill of poverty. Kaori poured 2 glasses of Hibiki 30. "Reviewing the quarterly projections?" she asked, noting the tablet on my lap. "We're up 12%, I said, setting it aside. "The new routes through Vancouver are working." "Good." She handed me the glass, her fingers lingering against mine. "You have a gift, Kenji. You see patterns where others see chaos." "I see what needs to be done," I said. She fell silent, looking out at the moonlit waves. She looked softer tonight. The tension that usually held her shoulders high relaxed. She reached into the pocket of her silk robe and pulled something out. She placed it on the table between us. It was a 10-yen coin. The copper was old, scratched and worthless to anyone else. "I still have it," she whispered. "The contract." I looked at the coin, then at her. "You kept it." "It reminds me," she said, her eyes meeting mine, "of the night I made the best investment of my life." My throat tightened. "I thought you didn't believe in emotional indulgence." "I didn't," she admitted, "until you. You broke every rule I had, Kenji. You and that boy. You walked into my perfectly ordered, cold existence and lit a fire in the center of it." "Are you sorry?" I asked. "I am terrified," she said honestly. "Every day I am terrified that something will take this away, that my enemies will find a weakness, that the past will catch up." "Let them come," I said, reaching for her hand. "We'll handle it together." "Together," she echoed, testing the word as if it were a new language. "We aren't a fairy tale, Kaori," I said, intertwining our fingers. "We're a tragedy that decided to rewrite the ending." She laughed, a low, throaty sound that vibrated in the air. "Yes, I suppose we are." She leaned over and kissed me, a slow, lingering kiss that tasted of whiskey and promise. It wasn't the desperate, frantic passion of the panic room. It was the steady, deep burn of a love that had found its footing. "I love you," she whispered against my lips, the words no longer feeling foreign to her. "I love you too," I replied. "Now come inside. It's getting cold." "Wait," she said, looking back at the coin. She picked it up and pressed it into my hand. "Keep it as a reminder." "Of what?" "That you are priceless," she said. 1 year later. The estate was unrecognizable. Lanterns hung from every cedar tree, casting a warm golden glow over the gardens. Tables laden with sushi, wagyu, and cakes lined the terrace. It was Leo's 6th birthday, and the guest list was a surreal mix of his kindergarten classmates, their nervous parents, and 50 of the most dangerous Yakuza enforcers in Japan, all trying awkwardly to look non-threatening while wearing party hats. I stood by the koi pond watching the scene. Leo was blindfolded, trying to hit a piñata that Takahashi was holding. The giant security chief was grinning, moving the target just enough to make it challenging but not impossible. "He is happy," a voice said beside me. I turned to see Kaori. She was wearing a dress of midnight blue velvet, stunning and regal. She held a glass of champagne, her eyes fixed on the boy. "He is," I agreed. "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving him this. For giving us this." "He gave it to us," she corrected. "He was the one who asked." Just then, Leo connected with the piñata. It burst open, showering the garden with candy. The children screamed with delight. The Yakuza guards cheered the loudest. Leo ripped off his blindfold, his face splitting into a grin so wide it looked painful. He looked around, scanning the crowd. He wasn't looking for the candy. He was looking for us. His eyes found me, then they found Kaori. He waved, shouting something lost in the noise. Kaori waved back, a genuine, unguarded look of love on her face. She turned to me, slipping her arm through mine. "Shall we join the chaos?" she asked. "We shall," I said. We walked toward the party, arm in arm. The staff bowed as we passed, not out of fear, but out of genuine respect. I saw the way they looked at us, the queen and her consort, the family. I thought about the future. I knew there would be other threats. There would be other rivals, other nights where the alarm klaxons wailed. The world we lived in was built on violence and blood. But as I looked at my son laughing in the sugar dust and felt the warmth of Kaori's body against mine, I knew we would face it all. I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I owned it. The October rain began to fall as the party wound down, a gentle drizzle that misted the windows of the estate. I stood in the library looking at the reflection in the glass. I remembered a night exactly 1 year ago. I remembered the smell of mildew in a 1K apartment. I remembered the weight of 84 cents in my pocket and the crushing, suffocating despair of a father who couldn't save his son. I looked at the reflection now, a man in a tailored suit, a man with a home, a purpose, and a love that defied logic. A man who had stared down death and made it blink. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the coin Kaori had given back to me, the 10-yen piece that started it all. It was warm in my hand. I was alone, afraid, with nothing when I walked into the rain that night. I was a ghost haunting my own life. Now, I looked back at the room, at Kaori reading by the fire, at Leo asleep on the rug with his new toys, at the walls that held us safe. I was protected. I was powerful. I had everything. I slipped the coin back into my pocket, right next to my heart. It began with a boy who gave away his last $3 to buy a smile. It ended with a man who would burn the world down to keep it. And the best part, we were just getting started.